Hello and welcome back to the Hardwood Hoops podcast. I'm your host, Liam Horsley, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, Mr. Ben Jones. How you doing, buddy?
Yeah, good, thank you. Nice to hear you introducing yourself this week.
Yep, and that's the plan. I don't want to leave it to you because I'm not sure what random insults and Mellor-related comments will come out of your mouth. Plan for today's podcast. This is going to be our Western Conference preview for the season. We're going to go through 1 through 15 like we did with the East. I think it's safe to say, Ben, this one was probably even harder than the East, you think?
Yeah, I remember looking at the last week at the East one and saying, oh, this is really difficult, blah, 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 but this has been almost impossible.
Yeah, I think there's the middle of this conference is going to be very difficult, so I'm sure we're going to have many differences. Plan is I'll start with mine, mention a few key additions for each team, see where they lie in my list, and then Ben will give us his afterwards. So let's start with number 1 then. This will be one of the ones I don't think we have any differences on. So my 1 seed is the reigning champions, the Los Angeles Lakers. The reasons I put is that I put the big 2. They were the 1 seed last year with the big 2. The big 2 are still there, and they've actually improved their roster, which is quite rare after winning the championship. In terms of key additions, they've also got Marc Gasol, who they've got on free agency, Dennis Schroeder in the trade with OKC, Wes Matthews, and then our favourite player, Montrezl Harrell. So for me, I just think they're going to win too many games, even if LeBron and AD do sit out a lot of the first month. I think they'll be slightly better than everybody else, and the Clippers always sit players anyway. So for me, I think the Lakers will still be that top seed. What about you?
Yeah, I've got the Lakers in 1 as well. I agree, they've added more than they've lost. I'm a little bit worried about their centre rotation, to be honest. I know they've lost 2 and gained 1 because I don't count Harrell as a centre. He's a power forward.
They'll play him centre though, right?
Yeah, they will definitely. When they play their small lineup, they'll play him at centre. And I personally don't know if that's a good idea. It is, I guess, if he plays in the kind of style that Dwight and JaVale did, which is that running and gunning, just athletic centre, trying to get up and down the court, dunking stuff, getting rebounds. But that's not the kind of centre Marc Gasol is, so I don't really know what kind of they're going for in that position at the moment. But I do love the new additions. I think they're going to gel really well with this team. And yeah, they seem to have gone from strength to strength. So Lakers at 1 easily.
Yeah, and they've also re-signed LeBron and AD, something we should mention, on longer-term contracts, a couple of years for LeBron and then a max contract for 5 years for AD. So just throw that one in there. I agree with everything you said on that team. One thing we should both add is that we think they're both going to be worse defensively, but probably better offensively. So it's how does that trade-off happen? But I think Marc Gasol's clever enough better to help them on that end, no matter how bad Montrezl Harrell is defensively.
Yeah.
Let's move on to 2nd seed then. So for me, I went with the other LA team, the LA Clippers. Similar reasons, really. 2 good stars. They're both, great stars. They're both staying. Kawhi, arguably, a shorter season should have less rest, just because the rest might be built in a little bit more. They've also signed a backer who me and you love, and I think he's a better player than Montrezl Harrell. So they've upgraded for me at their centre position, even if he comes off the bench as a 6-man. They also signed Batum, who's horrendous, so we won't worry about him. And then Luke Kennard has kind of replaced Landry Shamet, and they are almost 1 for 1 in terms of what they bring to the team. So that's not a negative or a plus. But I just think that change with the backer over Harrell will probably improve them. They were the 2nd seed last year, I believe. So I just think they're going to stick around there again and be a few games behind the Lakers. Not loads and loads of games, but I just think that when LeBron and AD lock in, they'll play almost every game then from that point, and they'll win a vast majority. Where the Clippers will probably still have the odd night where a Marcus Morris takes too many shots and they lose a game. So I've gone with the Clippers, and I think Kawhi will have another great season. And Paul George also got paid recently, so he'll have a lot to prove.
Yeah, I'm with you again. Clippers at 2. I do like the addition of Serge Ibaka, but it's still a small lineup, isn't it? From top to bottom, even when they put their biggest lineup out, they're going to struggle still against the likes of your Denvers and your Utahs, where they have a true centre who can be massively dominant. But they've had a year.
Those 2 centres can be.
Yeah, exactly. They've had a year to sort of gel and to get to know each other. Hopefully, got rid of him. learned from the mistakes of last year. New coach. I'm hopeful for them to improve slightly this year, but they've I don't feel like they've patched up the holes completely that they had last season. So we'll see how far they go.
Yeah, I think Zubac will probably still start at the centre position. And Paul George got the max as well. And before we move on, we should just quickly mention that. What are your just initial thoughts on that? Because I've seen a lot of people complain about it because he's getting paid less than AD. But I think what they didn't realise is if the Clippers didn't do this, they could lose both those stars, and they've lost every draft pick for those two stars. So you've got to keep one, even if you just want to trade him in 2 years. If they want to trade Paul George in a year's time, they can do it. But if you don't sign him, re-sign him, no one's going to trade for him. So I think people are forgetting that side of the deal. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, he's got drafts. He's got trade stock, hasn't he? He's got trade value. He is a good player. Everybody thinks about sort of their playoff run last season, and they don't go back to what kind of player he actually is and was through the regular season. He had those shoulder issues that he was kind of dealing with and coming off the back of last season. Him and Kawhi both have never played together. They're both in a new city. There was a lot for them to deal with last season, and considering they barely played a game together last season, they did very, very well to come where they did. It just all fell apart in the playoffs, whether that's down to bad coaching, whether that's down to personality clashes, whether that's down to them playing or trying to play a style that actually doesn't suit them as a team. I don't know what the definitive answer is. It's probably a mix of all of the above. But they are a team full of talent, and they just need to be able to show that. I think re-signing him to the max is absolutely a great move for the Clippers. Otherwise, sending all those draft picks away from him is an absolute.
Yeah, I agree. People have got to look past the cap figure and think about one playoff series. They've got to realise it's a business, and if you lose him, and Kawhi walks, what have you got? You've got absolutely nothing for probably 4 or 5 years. And the Clippers just don't want to do that again like they've done before. So I think it's a clever move. And also, Paul George finished 3rd in MVP voting and 7th in MVP voting in 2 years in a row, 2 seasons and 3 seasons ago. So it's not like he's a bad player. I just think the team fit quite wasn't right with the rest of the roster. And I just think that he had a bit of a... We've seen James Harden do it. He had 2 games where he was awful and just missed loads of shots, and he's a really good player. But maybe he gets too much flack for that, even though I did give him some on Twitter at the time. Let's move on then to the 3 seed. This is where it got tricky for me. 3 to 5 and 6 to 9. I was just really struggling with. So with in the 3rd seed, I've gone for the Dallas Mavericks. So reasons I've got written down: Luka grows again, which is not unexpected for a 21-year-old. The issue last year was everybody knows they were the best offensive team in the league, well, the best offensive numbers in the history of the NBA, but their defense was near the bottom of the league. So the whole offseason has been spent improving that. They've added Josh Richardson, James Johnson, Tyrell Terry, Josh Green, and Tyler Bay in the draft. And yeah, I just think they're going to be one of the best defensive teams in the West with their additions, if they can all buy in and get into the scheme. It might take some time for the players to get used to the scheme, obviously, but as the season goes, I think they're going to do really well. My only worry would be the first month when you've got no Porzingis and the new players are kind of gelling in. The record might not be where you want it to be after the first month, but if Luka can go in God mode for the first month and they've got a really good record, then I'd watch out because I think they're going to grow as the season grows. And you've seen a lot of James Johnson play for the Heat and people like that. Josh Richardson as well for Philly last year. I just think that they're both top defenders that are going to really improve this team defensively. So yeah, I've gone with the Mavs in 3, and I think Luka's a good shout for MVP.
Yeah, nice. I'll talk about my thoughts on Dallas when I get to them.
Yeah, go for your 3rd.
So my 3rd place, I've got the Utah Jazz.
Cool. We are miles away on this one.
I think they've been sold short throughout the regular season.
Jordan Clarkson fan over here.
Yeah, all because of Jordan. And you saw their potential in the playoffs, right? Donovan Mitchell was incredible, and Rudy Gobert, when he gets more involved, is a fantastic offensive center. We know he's a great defensive center, but he's an amazing offensive center. And they were also missing Bojan Bogdanovic, who is a great offensive presence for them as well, that can take the sort of the pressure off Mitchell. Mike Conley was coming back from injuries. They were sort of a mishmash of a team last year, and they've brought this core back. I think they've got strength and depth across sort of 1 to maybe 8 players that I'd have faith in on this Utah team, and I think that they can really push the boundaries this season. And as long as they're all able to gel and work together, Donovan Mitchell's going to carry on improving. He was fantastic last season. I think they're going to surprise people and finish strongly this season, and hopefully have a good push in the playoffs.
Nice. I'm sure the Utah fans will be happy to hear that. That's the highest I've seen them, I think. But you never know. Mike Conley could grow again, couldn't he?
Yeah.
I've got something else to add on the Mavs, but I'm going to wait until I forgot to say one of my points. I'm going to wait until you go with them later on. So on to the 4th seed then. Oh, by the way, with those top 3, do you see Utah being quite close to the top 2, or do you see the top 2 in the Lakers and Clippers being almost their own sort of, not category, but their own sort of tier where they're going to be 4, 5, 6 games ahead, and then everyone else is going to be more bunched up?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. About a five game cushion, I think, between the top 2 and the rest of the field.
Yeah, I think if Kawhi and George play that much together, I think, and obviously LeBron and AD, I think those 2 teams are just going to win. You know those sort of games where it comes down to last minute and every team loses a few throughout the season. I just don't think Lakers and Clippers won't lose many if those 4 players are playing for their team. So, yeah, I'd agree with you. I think this is definitely a top 2 tier.
Yeah.
Cool. On to the 4th seed then. This is one that's going to get a bit of uproar. I've gone with the Golden State Warriors. 3, 4, and 5 are just really close for me. And the team in 6th, I've seen people put in at 3, so I just think this is going to be tough. But I've gone with the Warriors. Steph, obviously back, the most rest he's had since high school, which I think will do him the world of good, because as LeBron constantly says, when you do these finals runs, it absolutely kills your mind and body because you get no break, whereas Steph's had a nice break from basketball now. So I'm really thinking that him and Luka could go toe-to-toe for the MVP race. And we all know when Steph's on that they're going to win a lot of games.
Yeah.
In terms of additions, they've got Wiseman, Oubre, Brad Wanamaker, who's a little bit of one that's gone not really mentioned because at times at Celtics he played too many minutes and Celtics fans didn't like him. But when you're the Warriors, you just need someone to come off and relieve Steph for 4 or 5 minutes. I think Wanamaker's a good veteran presence, and they added Kent Bazemore as well, who's another guard/wing that I quite like. Why I think they might be better is obvious, really. The amount of injuries they had last year, they're not going to be 15th in the West. 15th to 4th is a bit of a jump. This is like the Hawks jump that you had in the East. I could see them finishing anywhere from 6 to 4, to be honest. But I just think they've got really good wing depth, which they haven't had in like 4 or 5 seasons. No one's as good as a Durant or Iguodala, but then you never had anyone coming off the bench. Whereas now with Bazemore, Oubre, and Wiggins, I just feel like, and Pascal as well, I think they've got really, really good depth there. Which they'll need when they play the better teams in the West. So I like that. And I just think Steph's going to go crazy. And Dre is Dre. He's not as good as he used to be, but I think if he could be 70% Draymond Green, then defensively they're going to be really good. And in our draft podcast, we spoke about how high I am on Wiseman. So I think Wiseman's going to be a top tier NBA player. And if I'm wrong, then their team will be considerably worse. But if I'm right, then their starting 5 could look really, really good. So I'm going to lean with the Warriors. They've obviously got the good culture. They know how to win. And I think they'll beat a lot of these teams that maybe are more middling in the West, just because how good Steph Curry can be in the 4th quarter. So, yeah, I'm going to lean with them in the 4th seed.
Nice. Yeah, some good points made. My 4th seed, you'll be happy to hear they're no lower, is the Dallas Mavericks.
We could say Houston Rockets.
No way. Not that high. Dallas, yeah, the additions they made are to fill those defensive gaps, aren't they? And provided that they will gel, and I think the coaching and the culture there is fantastic, and I think that'll take really quickly. My biggest worry with them, which is the same thing every season, is injuries. And if Luka and Kristaps spend a lot of the time this season injured, then they're going to be in trouble, basically. I don't think they've got enough without either one of them playing at a time to keep them afloat and in that playoff race because the West is so tightly contested. So they might be okay if they're sort of alternating time off with injuries, but if both of them go out, they're in real trouble. So I think they'll be a fantastic team this year. I'm just really worried injury-wise.
Yeah, I would agree. To be fair, if any team lost their two starters, though, their two stars, even the Clippers and Lakers, they're going to struggle. But I think the worry with the Mavs is obviously Porzingis' constant injury history. So for me, it's if Luka plays 90% of games this season, that'd be fine because Porzingis will drop in whenever he can. Even if he does get injured again, I think he'll still play 30, 40 games at worst. And you just hope Luka's good enough to win you those other games like he did against the Clippers in the playoffs. It depends how much they play the East as well in the second half of the schedule because we know how weak the bottom of the East is. But if you've only got games against the West, it's going to be harder to win those tight games without a second star. But yeah, I think injuries are a big thing. The other thing I wanted to mention that I forgot to mention on my little bit was last year they were second last. They were last in the NBA for end of game scoring, so clutch points. So where they were winning games at the end and they'd end up losing them. That stat is just completely freakish. That changes every year. So for example, 4 years ago, the Warriors were randomly fourth bottom in clutch scoring, even though they won the title. That was just because of the games they would win, they'd be up by 20 and the players would come off. And then the tight games at the end, they would almost not concentrate for. 3 seasons before that, the team with the worst record in the NBA was best in clutch scoring just because they had a few games where they had a couple of buzzer beaters, so it kind of skews it. So for me, I just think that Luka's going to improve defensively, which is why they lost those games. They'll be so much better. I just think they're going to be better in the tight games. And most of the tight games they lost last year were to other West teams, so that never helped. So I just think they're going to be better in that sense. But definitely exciting season. Anything less than fifth, I think, as a team, they'd be very, very disappointed with. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think they should be. They should have high aspirations for themselves. I do think they're going to miss the key player in JJ Barea, though. Absolutely.
My boy JJ.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's it now. He says he's going to try and sign for another NBA team, and then if not, go back to Europe. But well loved with the Mavs fans. So I'm going to miss seeing him jump off the bench because he looks very tiny next to Boban. Cool. Let's go on to the 5th seed, I think it is. 5th seed. Yep. So for me, this is one that I was, like I said, these 3 teams, Mavs, Warriors, and Nuggets. I've got in the 5th seed. I've been moving them around a little bit. Just because the Nuggets I kind of always a little bit lower on. I don't know if you're the same, but we were a bit lower on in the bubble. And then they always impress us. They always do really well, and they always kind of finish as like 3rd or 4th seed every year now. So once again, I've got them lower than everyone else. I've got them in the 5th, but I think it'll be very closely contested. So key addition-wise, they've added JaMychal Green, RJ Hampton, and Zeke Naji, last 2 being from the draft. So not a lot, which is one of the reasons they're a bit lower for me, because they lost Jeremy Grant to the Pistons. Rumors have it that they offered him the same deal, but he wanted more shots. That's why he left. And for me, he was not one of their best players, because obviously you've got the 2 and you've got Porter Jr. coming up the ranks as well. But I think he's a very reliable player, 2-way player, that in the regular season, you need those sort of players to win you big games.
Yeah.
He would have probably always guarded the best player on the other team. And now that's going to have to be someone else, whether it is JaMychal Green or whether it is Paul Millsap, who came back for a minimum. I'm not sure. So I think they've got a little bit worse defensively. The reasons why I still think they'll be really good is obviously the 2 stars, Jokic and Murray. Murray looks like he's improved. If he sticks with that improvement, they probably could push to be a 3 seed. But until I see it for 70 games, I'm not going to say that he's reached this higher level completely. It might just be a good playoff run. But yeah, I'm not quite sure they're as good as the Warriors or Mavs. I think they're probably a better squad, maybe, than the Warriors. But I'm going to take Steph over either of those 2 players in the 4th quarter. It's hard to kind of run your offense through a big. You see that very often in the 4th quarter, and that's why Murray needs to be good. And if Murray's not quite good, he's obviously no Steph Curry. I just think that they'll probably lose a couple more games than a team like the Warriors. So I'm going to stick the Nuggets into 5th. What about you?
In 5th, I have the Denver Nuggets.
We matched up. Three out of 5.
I completely agree. I think we always underrate them, and they always surprise us.
Yeah, probably will happen again.
But this year, I'm going to back myself and say I reckon we've got them about right. It's consistency. We say it every time we talk about the Nuggets. It's which Murray's turning up. Is it an off night? Is it an on night? Is he hot? Is he cold? Is Jokic going to be aggressive? Is he going to be a passer? Which side of these players is going to turn up? If the consistency is there, if Murray's on every night and Jokic is aggressive and using his passing ability in equal measures, they are going to be a really, really sort of difficult team to stop, especially with the sort of the guys they're going to have around them. And if Porter can develop further and become a better player than he was last season, certainly defensively, then they are looking super dangerous. So I think fifth is about right for them at this point.
Yeah, I would agree. A lot of people disagree with me. They think this tier is a bit bigger, but I think these three teams will be very interchangeable at times. It'll be one of those, we're looking at the standings and one's in third one week and then one's in fifth the week after, and it will go down to the last couple of games. I think injuries will be key. Like I said, if Steph, Luka, or Jokic misses any time for either team, then I think they're really going to struggle offensively.
Yeah.
So let's move on to sixth then, another team in the playoffs. For me, I've gone with the Portland Trail Blazers, and this is the team where I've seen a lot of people putting them 3 and 4. And I kind of wanted to put them at 3 and 4 when I looked at their roster, but I've just decided to leave them in at 6.
Do you know what? The first list I did, I had them at 3.
Yeah, I had them at 4 on my first list.
Well, as you can hear, I've not mentioned them so far, so I had a real rethink.
I think that this could be the new Nuggets for us, where we get it a little bit wrong, maybe. But who knows?
Yeah.
So Blazers in 6 for me. I've gone. The main reason clearly is the players are back healthy. They had an awful injury record for the last 18 months, one of the worst in the league. And Dame's kind of carried them through those periods of time. And now they've got those players back. They've had a really good offseason. They've added Robert Covington. Rodney Hood came back. Melo came back. Cantor came back, even if it was a year later. And they added Harry Giles as well, who managed to score 15 points last night against his old team, the Kings, in pre-season, which was funny. So I like their roster, I really do. But for some reason, I just don't like them as much as that. And if I'm honest, it's probably the Warriors. That's the team where I think everyone listening will be saying you should have the Blazers above the Warriors, maybe. But not quite for me. I think this can be a lot better defensively. But I'm still not sure on the rotations yet. I've seen a lot of rumours that Melo could still start. That Rodney Hood might start at the 3, Covington at the 4, whereas I think Covington needs to start at the 3. So until I see this kind of new look team develop, I'm not going to kind of set them to be as high as the 3, where I've got the Mavs. I know what the Mavs are going to be like. Partly that's biased because I've watched them all the time, so I know how good they're going to be. Same with the Nuggets. We all kind of know what we're going to get with the Nuggets, but I think the Blazers have had so many changes that I put them in 6th, and I'm going to kind of need to see them do it. I'm still a little bit worried about defensively because I think Melo, Zach Collins, Cantor, Nurkic, they're still going to get really big minutes. Even if you add Covington, who's good defensively, I think those 4 players aren't good defensively. Cantor's arguably made you worse defensively off the bench.
Yeah, potentially.
And the 2 guards, as much as they try on defense, they're not 2-star guards that don't try. I don't want to be harsh on them, but they're not gifted defensively at all. So they're not going to improve defensively. So they really need to work out their rotation. So until I see them for a good period of time, I just think I'll put them in 6th. They're too good not to be in the top 6 for me. Dame's probably going to grow again this season, but I'm just going to leave them in 6th and see how they do. So yeah, I'll put them in the 6th. What about you?
I've had a real battle with the teams in 6 and 7 on my list, and I'm still I'm sat here crossing out and re-putting arrows on, and so I'm going to go with how I originally wrote it this morning on my 10th draft of this.
I was going to say that'll be your 10th draft at least.
So in 6th, I've got Golden State Warriors.
I think that's fair.
Yeah, it's tentative. Can Steph come back and step straight into where he was 2 seasons ago, sort of on that MVP cusp, pushing the league further than any other point guard in the league ever has? What can this wing depth bring to the team with Wiggins and Oubre and Bazemore, Damon Lee, Jordan Peele? they've not had depth like that at that position before, so that'd be really interesting to see. For me personally, I'm not high on Draymond Green. I think he is potentially past it in terms of being the man to guard the bigs in this league. I don't think he can hold a torch to your Jokic's or your Anthony Davis or whoever you're putting up there. Those sort of top tier marquee big men are going to run rings around him this season. It's not a season where he can play himself into fitness for the playoffs either. They've got to be on form, every player, all year this season, I think, for them to perform. So I just don't know if Green's got it in him. Obviously, you've seen a lot of Wiseman coming through the draft. I haven't yet, so I'm in sort of limbo with him. If he comes out and he is a massive defensive presence for them in the middle and can help Draymond out in that respect, then there's more hope for them. But my biggest issue is when they come up against teams that have a really good power forward or centre, I feel like they could potentially struggle, and Steph, coming off the back of serious injury, might not be enough to carry them over that sort of line. So I can't put them higher than 6th.
I thought you'd have them lower, so I'm quite impressed with you, to be honest. Steph Curry support is well liked on this podcast.
He's good for you not to, isn't he?
Yeah, well, yeah, he is incredible. Really, really good. And his injury was his hand as well, his off shooting hand. So it's not like he did it, he didn't do like an Achilles or a knee. Like physically, he should be exactly the same player.
You'd hope so, but he's got paper ankles anyway, so you never know.
Yeah, he's just got to ramp up, I guess, and just get used to playing basketball again. Which is why I think if I was them, I wouldn't worry about the first few weeks of the season and trying to blow everyone away. I would just get everyone a good rotation and not just throw Steph into 40 minutes.
Yeah.
But for my MVP betting that I've done, I hope they do throw Steph in for 40 minutes and he scores 50 on Christmas Day, because that'll help. Yeah, I agree with you on what Wiseman said. What you said about Wiseman is going to be difficult. See how he ends up, and it would not shock me if Draymond Green was traded for James Harden, which is something we've been speaking about on WhatsApp quite a lot. I'm not counting the Warriors out of a James Harden trade. I've just got a sneaky feeling, because it's always a team you never expect. Look at the Raptors with Kawhi, the Clippers with Paul George, the OKC Thunder with Paul George. There's always a random team that comes in and trades for someone that you wouldn't think. Look at the Warriors with D'Angelo Russell. So it wouldn't surprise me if they tried to make a move for someone. And if that someone was James Harden, you had Harden and Steph, I think you'd score 130 points a night.
Yeah, definitely. I just don't think it helps. I've never really been particularly high on Draymond Green.
I know, yeah.
I've never really rated him massively highly. I think he's succeeded on a team where the attention's been on other players and he's sort of the fourth option and therefore looks really good.
I do think defensively, though, he will go down as one of the greatest. Well, he goes down as one of the greatest of all times. When they were really good, he would just switch onto everyone, and I think that's what he's known for. But I think at the start, he was kind of known as a 3-point shooter as well, and that maybe have been a bit overblown. And now he's obviously a 20% 3-point shooter, so that's dropped off a cliff.
Yes.
Let's see. He's getting older. They're all getting older. Steph's obviously younger than Dre, but we'll have to see what they bring. I think they're going to be one of the most interesting teams anyway, because I think they'll also beat teams they shouldn't beat. They'll go to the Bucks on Christmas Day and randomly, not saying they will do this, but they could randomly beat them by 15 points because Steph goes crazy.
Yeah.
But then I think they could also go away to the Kings, Steph not have a great shooting night, or maybe get in foul trouble, and they could struggle to score in the second half, and they could lose in the fourth quarter. I think they're going to be a little bit up and down at times. But we'll see. Let's move on to my 7 then. This is the one that I had a lot lower than you. In the 7th seed, I have the Utah Jazz. They were originally in 6th, but I had to move. I swapped them with the Blazers this morning. So the reasons that I think they'll do well is they've got good continuity. And I really like Conley, if he can kind of play. He has to play better than last year. He has to play a little bit better than last year. He's better in the bubble, to be fair.
Yeah, he's got to play like he was in the bubble, definitely.
Yeah, and Donovan Mitchell, we both really like. He won someone a jersey on our giveaway in the bubble, so he's going to be always well liked on the pod. But for me, I'm just a little bit worried about their bench unit and their scoring when Donovan Mitchell's not on the floor. Their bench is just not great. They've re-signed Derek Favors to bolster out, and I think that might say enough. Not that he's a terrible player, but still offensively, it's just not what you need. And I spoke about this on our free agency podcast with Joe Holbert, but they had to overpay Jordan Clarkson because they need someone who could just score off the bench, just whilst Donovan Mitchell's getting a breather. And when you've got to pay someone that much money just to come off and score, your bench is really struggling. So for me, I think they're a little bit weak on that end. And I do think there's a chance Rudy Gobert could be traded. He's a free agent next year, and I don't think you should ever pay a center a max contract. So if I'm the Jazz, I'd be trying to trade him now, so you don't just lose him for free. But they could trade him and get something good back, and then I think it could actually make them better offensively. Or they could just trade him for picks and something else just to trade him, and then they're probably worse defensively, which hurts them. So I think that Gobert trade, if it ever does happen, is going to be key. And if it doesn't happen, then I think 6-7 sort of range is going to be fair. I've seen a few people put them out of the playoffs, and I just don't think that's going to happen with their coaching staff. It's far too good for me. And I think Donovan Mitchell, similar to Jamal Murray, he took a real big jump in the bubble. And if he does that for a whole season, he's going to be a top 10, 12 player in the NBA. And if that happens, if you've got a top 12 player in the NBA, you're probably not going to be missing the playoffs. So I'm still high on them as a team. I'm just not quite as high as you. And I've seen a lot of people put them at 3, 4, 5, 6. So I'm probably lower than the average. But I'm just worried about that scoring. I'm worried about that bench unit. So, yeah, put them in 7 for me. Who is your 7 seed?
It's tricky, isn't it, with the Utah? Like, they came 6th in the standings last season, but 6-4 were tied with 44 wins.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be just as tight this season.
Yeah, well, and I think before the bubble started as well, 7 seed was half a game back from the 5th seed. So there's 5 teams just battling out there. Yeah. And I think even the 3rd seed was only 2 games behind the Clippers going into the bubble. Yeah. So, I expect it to be tighter again in the middle, almost worse this year, because I think there's going to be 10 teams that are a little bit closer together rather than just 5 teams.
Yeah, no, I agree. My 7th, I've got Portland. Same reasoning behind you, really. I love their roster. I love the way they've built it. I think it's got good strength and depth. Their biggest problem is none of them can defend.
Apart from Covington, but he's overrated defensively as well now.
Yeah, and if he's your best defender and you're going up against a team with 2 superstars, well, you're already messed up, aren't you? You've stopped one of them. What now? They are just going to be all offense, trying to outscore teams. They are going to be super fun to watch.
Their games with the Warriors are going to be fun.
Unless like watching defense, which sometimes I do. So, yeah, and I just love the Blazers and the players they have on that roster. I think they're all great people and great characters. So
what do you think their starting 5 should be for them to be a better team? Not what you'd want it to be, but if you had to think what's the best basketball fit, what do you think they should do with their starting 5?
It's
true. Two guards, obviously. CJ.
Yeah, they're locked, and then Nurkic.
Nurkic is locked. Then you've got Melo, Collins, Covington, Hood. That's probably the main ones, isn't it? 2 of those 4.
Well, I always say it. Melo's better at the 4 than he is at the 3. So then
Collins.
Put instead of Collins, put Melo at the 4 and Covington at the 3 and Hood off the bench. Gary Trent Jr. as well was amazing in the bubble.
Yeah, I like him as a 6-man option, to be honest.
He's great as well. So, through sort of 6 and 7, you're still looking quite good.
Don't want to play counter at the power forward and go all out offense.
You could do, but to be honest, I genuinely think he will be better coming off the bench as just energy. Like, he's not going to bring you much. Like we said, defensively, he's going to bring you nothing but energy, and potentially when he's feeling really good offensively, he can still bring something to the table. So this might be just sort of putting a cat amongst the pigeons when you bring him off the bench. Just let him go.
I think you need to be careful with your bench unit, don't you? Put a couple of good defenders with him, like Rodney Hood maybe, and keep Covington out there just to try and get some sort of defense.
As a sort of bolster, yeah, definitely.
Cool. All right. Well, that's your opinions on the Blazers. I think that's fair. I think they're going to be anywhere from 7 to 3, like you said. They're probably the highest team that could go up or down. To be honest, them and the Warriors. So the 8 seed, then the last team that would normally make the playoffs, but with the play-in, we've got a couple more. I struggled massively with this one. I love Chris Paul, but that means there's a caveat, and I haven't got him in here, so I've got to apologise to him, even though he's not listening. So the 8th seed, I've gone with the Houston Rockets. The reasons I put James Harden. If James Harden stays, and he stays all the way through to the deadline, they will win a lot of games because that's what they do. He'll score enough points to win them games. I actually really like their off season, which is weird to say. I love Steven Silas. He was a coach for the Mavs, and I think he's not going to be better than D'Antoni, but I think he's going to be more flexible, which is something that we quite like. I think he's going to be much better at doing a defensive scheme that kind of buys in all 5 guys rather than leaves a couple that don't have to defend, or maybe weaker players like Eric Gordon out there. I think he's going to really do a good switching scheme. So I've gone with the Rockets. Obviously, if James Harden gets traded before January the 1st, then they are not going to be the 8th seed. So at the moment, I'm kind of thinking that he'll stay at least till the week of the deadline, which I believe is in end of March. So it gets us through 3 months of the season. I think then they'll kind of taper off, and we don't know what they're going to get. If they get Ben Simmons or if they get Chris Middleton, they'll still win games in the West. But if they trade it for loads of picks and a young player, then yeah, they're going to lose loads of games. So it's hard to tell. The reason why they're lower, obviously Westbrook left, Covington left, and James Harden's upset. PJ Tucker apparently is not happy as well, but I don't know if that's with James Harden. So there's a little bit of turmoil there. In terms of players they've added John Wall, who I'm sneakily high on. Even though I've always hated John Wall, but I've just become this random Twitter defender of John Wall. I don't quite know why. I think he's going to be better than what people think, even if that's not as good as what he should be. I think he's going to be better than people think. They've added Christian Wood, who was one of my favourite players in free agency that me and you spoke about a few times. And they added Boogie Cousins, who is for real cheap, which is a real flyer. We're recording this after the first night of preseason games, and Boogie was really good in the first quarter. He got a steal. He got like 5 rebounds. He got like 9 points, and I was like, Boogie's back. Yeah, I tweeted Boogie's back, and then 30 seconds later, he did a dunk, and then he like ran up the floor, and he looked like he was about 50 years old. So I don't know how back he really is, but
I'll tell you what as well. John Wall looked good.
Yeah, John Wall looked really good. He drove to the paint really, really well. He still went for too many random like pull-up threes.
Weird.
Yeah, and like open players and like dribbling into a 3, but that's just John Wall. But he got to the rim really well, so he looked athletic. So for me, I just think a starting 5 of Wall, Harden, Eric Gordon, PJ Tucker, and then either Wood or Cousins.
It's dangerous, isn't it?
Yeah, it's dangerous, and you're going to have obviously Daniel House, Ben McLemore, and whichever big doesn't start. Yeah, they're going to be coming off the bench. So for me, I think they're better than what people think with James Harden there. And I still think that the 76ers are the best trade. And I think if they get Ben Simmons back, they'll probably be not just as good, but they'll be way better defensively. And I don't know, 70% as good on offense. So I think they'll still sneak into the playoffs if that was the trade. So I've gone with the Rockets in 8. Sorry to CP3. I know you're a big fan of mine.
I'm with you.
Oh, nice.
It's in an 8 as well. As long as they've got James Harden, I've got them in 8. If
they trade him in March, though, you still think they have enough to sneak in? Because the reason I did this was because I think if he starts the season, they'll go out and they'll be like 4, 5, 6 seed for most of the season, and whenever they trade him, they'll fall away a little bit. Or do you see them just being in the 8th, 9th battle even with Harden?
I think even with Harden, they could potentially be battling around that lower half of the sort of the Western Conference. The only reason I've got them in 8th is that I like the teams higher. I like them in those positions, yeah, and I just couldn't count Houston out at this point in time. They're too dangerous. They're just too unproven. Too many people coming off the back of injuries, new coaches, like you've sort of touched on, unhappy players. It's so volatile at the moment. I can't really sort of warrant getting them higher than this. If they trade for Ben Simmons, it's do you then slide him to the power forward or sort of small forward, or do you put him at the point and slide Wall to the 2? It's going to be a weird sort of makeup.
Yeah, I think in modern day basketball it matters less, doesn't it? Because he'll just guard whoever the best player is.
Yeah.
Because and then him and Wall have just taken it in turns bringing the ball up, wouldn't it? It'd just be like a point forward. And the other team's then got to say, oh, do we guard Ben Simmons with a point guard or with a guard because he's bringing the ball up and he's quite quick, or do we put a 3 or 4 on him, even though they're probably going to be slower than him? So it does give the team a little bit of a problem. I don't know if it might turn into 76ers light.
Potentially.
With the fact they've got less shooting and they've obviously got bigs. But Christian Wood's quite a good shooter for a big. But yeah, that's if that trade happens. We have no idea. I just think that whatever trade happens with Harden, I think, could blow the league wide open because there's so many teams that people aren't even considering that could just say, F it, let's trade one of our best players for Harden because Harden's better, if that makes sense. There's only probably, well, I know we're not his biggest fan, but what would you say? There's only 5 players in the league that are definitely better than him, and then there's probably another 5 that are maybe better than him and they're younger, so you wouldn't trade those 5. But apart from that, there's probably every other player you'd say is probably available.
Yeah, definitely. We've never said, like, we're not a big fan of watching him play, but we've never said he's not a talented player. He is an incredible player. He's
second best scorer in the league for me, behind Durant, since I've watched the last few years. Not that he's better than LeBron, but I mean, just a pure scoring. If you're asking someone, right, I need 40 points, like, oh, we're the Houston Rockets, we need you to score 50 tonight. It's the only chance to win it. And he's just like, yeah, okay, I'll score 50, and he can do it in 3 quarters. I've not seen many players like that.
And he's adaptable as well. Like, we've seen him take that more of a point guard role and share the ball a bit more. And he's a good post defender when he wants to be.
Yeah, he is. He's strong for his size, isn't he?
Yeah, I can't count them out while he's there. And I'd imagine as well, after your comments, I reckon we've got the same team in 9th.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. Caveat with the James Harden thing: if he does get traded quite early, we are going to mention where we think the Rockets will finish in our next pod after that. So if he does get traded before the season or quite early, we'll kind of swap this order around and just run it through again because, yeah, we both think that if they do a bad trade for him, we could see them leave. Before we move on to 9 quickly, no analysis. Just want to know your gut instinct. Where does Harden get traded? Like in your initial thought, what's the one, maybe one team and then one surprise team you think could come out that would work before we move on?
Let's stick with Philly as the sort of the favourite. It seems the most likely at this point in time.
Yeah.
Have
you got an outsider? Because I know a lot of people like the Pelicans because they got so many picks. Obviously, like I like the Warriors as an outsider. Some people like a team like the Hawks, but I don't think that'll happen. But
no, what team's got the best sort of assets to send back, isn't it? But also from that outside kind of bet, it's really tricky.
That's why I think it could be anybody, not literally anybody because you have to have assets. But I mean, I think there'll be a team come out of nowhere that puts a really good offer in that we hear about. Maybe even if he doesn't go there, we'll hear about it. Like, oh, someone's made a big offer for James Harden, and we will be like, oh wow, I didn't even see that coming. Like a Nuggets or someone like that,
Well, we were talking off pod the other day, weren't we, at some potential options. I kind of think Miami could. That's a great outside option. They've got the assets, they've got the players to trade away. I just think him and Jimmy Butler on a team together is built for an implosion.
Yeah, and I do think the Rockets probably they seem to want a star player, even if it's a young star. And I think Tyler Hero is a little bit overrated for that. He's a good player, but
I'll tell you what. I'll put on the record there my outside extreme change, which is he goes to the Bucks, but they send Giannis back.
Because they know he's not going to sign.
Yeah.
That'd be crazy. They do hate each other, so they can't play together.
They go from this inside-out team to this 3-point shooting madness team in the swing of one player.
To be honest, if it's that or losing Giannis, you would choose that trade, wouldn't you? Even though at the time they'd be fuming as a fan base. When they look back on it in a year's time, they'd be like, oh, right, if Giannis was going to leave anyway, then this is a good deal.
Makes sense.
Okay, cool. Well, I'll go 76ers and I'll just stick to what I've been saying. I think the Warriors are a random outside team if they decide to trade Dre or Clay.
Nice.
If they do trade Clay, they will look really bad. But it's probably a clever thing to do, but they will look really bad to their fans.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's go on to the 9 then. We'll breeze through 11 to 15, but with 9 and 10, we'll still do it in good depth. So the 9th seed, I think you're right. We've both got the Suns. Is that true?
Correct.
They've had a great off-season. They had a great bubble. They finished ninth last. Well, they finished 10th, I think, technically, didn't they? Because they missed the playing game. So they finished 10th technically. So we've only got them jumping up a little bit, but I think that's more because a lot of teams have had a good off season. And you've got the caveat: the Warriors were the worst team in the West, and then they get all their players back apart from one, so then they're always going to be a bit better. Key additions wise, obviously CP3 in that big trade. They've had Jay Crowder as well, very impressive signing. I know we both like him. They've had Langston Galloway for a bit of shooting off the bench, which is another one. They drafted Jalen Smith, which is a draft pick that's just stupid. They could have picked up Aaron Baines as a backup center and spent that draft pick on someone a little bit more forward thinking in terms of the future. But they wanted a center and they got a center. I've seen a lot of people have them at 5. A lot of people have them at 6. And I know I said this about the Blazers, but I think I could probably be the most wrong on the Suns. If someone does have an injury, if Houston does trade James Harden, and then a team like the Warriors maybe start slow, you could see a team like the Suns start off really fast and be a 5th, 6th seed. But for me, I just think the team above them are a little bit too good. I still think they'll have issues. I don't know. I think they're going to have issues with consistency. But then there's CP3. So it's a very difficult team, isn't it? They've had a lot of changes.
What scares me is thinking what CP3 did with the roster he had last season. And you would say he's gone to a better roster, wouldn't you? So what can he do with this team? And I'm the same with you. We could be making an absolute huge mistake here, counting them out of the playoffs, because you could see them with the way they are, the way they're built. I could see them up in 4th quite easily. The way they play the offense.
If Booker continues to grow and CP3's, because the thing with CP3 is he's a great player, and last year he did really well with injuries. But before last year, he's had 3 or 4 bad years of injuries. So if CP3 gets another injury, the team is almost the same as last year, just with Jay Crowder.
And I think what helped him was having that rotation of guards. He wasn't always reliant on running that team. He could step to the bench, and he's got these 2 guards that he is developing and bringing on in his kind of style, taken under his wing. Yep. Here, I guess he's got Booker to sort of pick up the slack. But after that, who can you rely on?
Yeah, it's difficult. It is difficult. I do think if James Harden trade is not for a star, that when we come and do our James Harden emergency pod, we'll be swapping the Suns and Houston around, I think. But let's not forget this year there's a play-in tournament. So 9 and 10, they're not in the playoffs, but they're in a play-in tournament. And even if the Rockets hang on, they do still trade Harden. I could see the Suns winning a play-in tournament. Like if you got Chris Paul and Devin Booker in a 2-game scenario against the Jazz or the Rockets.
Let's go away with Suns.
Yeah, which is who I've got above them. And I know you've got the Blazers and Rockets above them, haven't you? There's 7 and 8. So they could easily beat those 2 teams in a one-off game. I know it would be 2 games, but they could easily go quite far in the play-in tournament. So
I'd love to see that Blazers matchup.
Blazers Suns in the play-in tournament.
Yeah,
that would be fun. And if James Harden's there as well, that'd be. I wouldn't tell you who my 10 is yet, but if those 4 teams are the 4 teams I've got, it'll be a very fun matchup. I think we could be a little bit low on the Suns, but I think it's a team that we kind of need to see play. And I do think after a month when we're doing our weekly podcasts, we could be saying we got it wrong, which all Suns fans will be happy with. But I think they'll finish a lot closer to 8, 7, and 6 than they will to like 11th, for example. I think they'll be well up there, and they'll be battling all season for a top 7, 8 seed.
Yeah, there could be 1 or 2 games between sort of 7,
6 and 10.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. But they had a great off season, and they've got amazing jerseys as well. So
yeah,
we don't hate you Suns fans. We do love Chris Paul, but we're just a little bit worried about everyone else apart from Paul and Booker. Cool. On to 10 then. I think we might have the same again. Actually, no, you're quite high on the one player that I'm not, so maybe not. But 10, I've gone with the Pelicans. They've added good vets, Bledsoe, Adams. They've added Kira Lewis in the draft, who's the fastest player in the draft. So him and Zion on the fast breaks seem nuts. And he said JJ Barea then. JJ Redick said that this is the fittest he's ever seen Zion, and JJ's like a straight up guy. He's not going to come out and say rubbish in the media. This is on his own podcast as well, so he seemed quite hopeful. And he said apparently that Steven Adams has really fitted in well with Zion as well in terms of defensively, so that's nice to see. So I think they'll be really, really good. I think they'll be not as close to the Suns, but I think they'll be much closer to 7, 8 than they will be to the team I've got in 11. For me, from like 5, 6 to 10 is quite close. And if Zion could be as good as we all think he could be, they could easily also get into an 8 seed. So I did struggle with them. So good off season, but still young. Brandon Ingram got paid, didn't he? So I have to see how that kind of reflects in his game. So I really like the Pelicans. I think they're probably 1 year away. And I know I just said that they think Adams and Zion are good defensively, but offensively, I'm a little bit worried about Adams and Zion in the same team. I'm not sure if it's the best spacing. But I still think they'll be a really, really good team, and they'll be nowhere near 11. I think they'll be much closer to the teams above them. So, yeah, I've gone with the Pelicans at 10.
I'm with you.
Oh, I think matched more on this one in the East.
Pelicans' strength and depth is really sort of something to be reckoned with. Brandon